Date, 74 PST post-stasis time. The Teran alliance was pushed from the planet by the Fystories Empire. That sentence made Zanara pause for a moment, staring down at the screen hovering in front of themselves. They understood the words, of course. Zanara hadn't spent their thousands of years of existence being illiterate, but one of them was a new word, one they hadn't seen before. Teran Zanara liked to consider themselves well-read and up-to-date on the latest goings-on in the universe. In fact, all of his species would consider themselves as such. Most species can be defined as having one goal or another, one word that broadly describes their culture: warrior, explorer, conqueror, trader, healer. The Gurlin could be described as watchers, archivists, cataloging and learning about the millions of species that inhabited the near-infinite universe over the near-infinite number of galaxies. When you got to the technological level of the Gurlin, there really wasn't much else you could do. Sure, you could go and conquer planet after planet with your technological advantage, but not only was that boring, eventually your grand empire would either collapse into infighting, or worse, you would end up attacking a species with some form of higher protection. Becoming a god was a thing, although there were only so many types of life you could create and civilizations to form. Before that becomes stale, too. Ascending to a higher form of existence was always an option, and something many Gurlin had chosen to do at this point, although Zanara didn't quite feel that their hundreds of thousands of years of physical existence had been enough yet, and wasn't quite ready for that next step. Besides, you couldn't get a stiff drink after ascending, so instead, they watched. The millions of species, trillions of people, all doing interesting, special, and fun things. Like a never-ending soap opera, they fought and loved, they laughed and died. Seeing betrayals and alliances form as various empires and governments rose and fell made for a level of entertainment. Which was why Zanara was confused that they didn't know the word Teran. It wasn't a species in the Gurlin's central repository, and finding something new was always interesting. Zanara sat in the comfortable den of their creation, a mass of blankets and snacks suspended in a white void, perfect for some light reading about the goings-on in the Milky Way. In the middle of this pile of comfort lay the Gurlin. Describing a Gurlin is a difficult thing since they can choose their appearance as they see fit, able to shift and change their entire being with a mere thought. Right now, they chose to take the form of a small, furry brown mammal nestled snugly in between the literal mountain of white, soft pillows and duvets. No, this wouldn't do at all. This is the environment for chilling out, not for doing research on an unknown species. In an instant, reality moved at Zanara's mere prodding, the room changing to a simple study of brick walls and oak furniture, faux books lining a shelf on one wall and a roaring fire on the other. Their own form took on a more reptilian professional appearance, adorned in silken robes of red and gold, six-fingered hands covered in light gray-blue scales, all four of their arms reaching out to various hovering interfaces as they started looking through this galaxy's various repositories for more information on these Terrans and their alliance. They soon found what they needed in various textual descriptions: a species of primate, recently appearing on the galactic scene a mere 74 years ago, B+ level technology, and if their propaganda was to be believed, hadn't just built an AI that didn't kill them, but claimed to live together with their AI, unified under one name. Now that was a rarity. They weren't the first species in the universe to survive the creation of an AI, but most of the time it ended with a mutual separation, where creator and created decide to go their own way. There were several Gurlin AI civilizations scattered around the universe, and their creators wished them well but left them to do their own thing, whoever these Terrans were. It sadly wouldn't matter. Having to fight the Fystories Empire as a newcomer to the galaxy was a harsh introduction to the universe. It was highly unlikely this single species could stand against the terrible power of the 5 shitheads that made up the Empire, although calling your new alliance after yourself was a little bit arrogant. Normally, new species went for something more optimistic, the Council of Stars or something like that. A little bit of curiosity caused Zanara to go looking for who exactly the Terrans had allied with, to the extent that they'd be willing to go to war on the Terrans' behalf. Upon finding that information, they paused, stopping for a moment as they looked at the list with a moment of confusion. This had to be wrong. There is no way this is right. There were 428 names on that list. 2 of them had joined after the war had been declared. The species had only been on the galactic scene for 74 years. This wasn't possible for a civilization to garner this many allies in such a short period of time. Sure, most of the names on the list were smaller ones, 2 system governments, but they could see a handful of heavy hitters looking down the gigantic list of names. Zanara checked once, checked twice, then decided that this was worth further investigation. How did a civilization creating this alliance get missed in our records? This should be worth some note. Their confusion was driven deeper as they investigated who was responsible for logging, cataloging, and maintaining diplomatic relations with that area of the galaxy. It was a Gerlin by the name of Zanara, based on the same station as Zanara was currently on. There was a meeting booked to start proper diplomatic relations with the Terans in 25 years, 3 months, and 2 days' time, just slightly under the 100-year deadline upon discovering a new species. This was even more confusing, suggesting that Zanara hadn't missed this huge alliance forming out of nowhere, but instead had purposefully avoided adding it to the records. Well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. The room disappeared in a moment, leaving Zanara in the public area of the Gerlin station as they shifted their form to that of a giant green avian. They took flight, taking to the air as they moved towards the known location of Zanara's quarters. They could have just teleported, of course. Well, teleported was the wrong technical term for it. You couldn't transport atoms without destroying the original object. But it was far easier to just move the rest of the universe closer to your location. Still, Zanara chose not to do that, always enjoying the feeling of flight as they moved through the station, taking a moment to gather their thoughts. Like all Gerlin stations, size wasn't really a measurable thing, since the physical limitations of dimensional constructs were no longer being heeded. The station was both the size of a pinhead and larger than most planets, allowing Zanara to fly through corridors through it in a matter of both years and seconds. It looked nothing like any ordinary vessel, the various rooms and areas of the station refusing to follow any logical or even Euclidean rules. Sprawling landscapes of wildness gave way to voids of crystalline light floating in the air. The birth of a star could be found at the bottom of an infinite staircase to yesterday. A side door took you to a quiet diner, serving warm, comforting food while it continually rained outside. When dimensions and physical reality cease to be the limiting factor of a species' technology, the only limit left to break is that of your imagination. Eventually, after a period of time unable to be measured, Zanara arrived at their location, Zanara's quarters. The beach was vast, an infinite horizon of golden sands stretching out to infinity. Above it, a sky lit up with a never-ending supernova. They could see Zanara in the center of it all as they approached, the Gerlin taking a long, flat form, stretching for miles and having buried themselves slightly, enjoying the sensation of the warm, shifting sands cascading around the large surface area of their chosen form. Zanara felt the words enter their mind as they approached, giving a polite wave of their wing before responding in kind. There was a pause, a most noticeable pause as Zanara slowly got worried. The space changed, the never-ending beach being replaced with a more formal setting. A well-furnished office with no other distractions, various floating screens and interfaces allowing access to a universe of information. Zanara also changed, choosing a more professional form, the same reptilian bipedal form Zanara had used while researching. Zanara shifted themselves as well, doing the same out of politeness. Zanara asked, moderately confused and curious. Zanara paused as they tried to collect their thoughts before deciding upon a different approach. There was a moment before a visualization appeared on one of the screens floating in between the pair of Gerlin. A Teran, unclothed, arms and legs stretched out, showing their furless, bipedal, and tailless form. Zanara made a small coughing noise, struggling for a moment to remain professional. This creature was adorable. It was like a child who hadn't gone past their larval stage, hairless and with only 4 limbs. Somehow the small tufts the Teran did have upon their tiny heads made them even cuter. Zantari had the distinct urge to give this creature hugs and candied treats. Noticing the other's reaction, Zanara continued, making a gesturing motion to the image. It gets worse. This is how most Terrans look on their day-to-day life. The image changed again, this time showing an actual image of one of the Terran's military leaders. Zantari's professionally completely broke this time, emitting an actual physical noise which could only be described as a squee of cute overload. Oh my goodness, that is adorable. Look at it. It's got a little hat and those clothes. It's trying to be serious, but it's not, and those shiny adornments on his chest. Look at it. It's so squishable. That is the first admiral of their war fleet, by the way. A very distinguished position, so I've come to understand. I also had the same reaction when their diplomats contacted our outpost in this galaxy 72 years ago. Zantari slowly calmed down, both feeling a regret that they didn't know about this adorably cute species that took themselves too seriously, and a confusion as to why Zanara looked so worried. So what's the problem? An adorably cute species wants to open diplomatic communications with us. What was your first reaction to seeing this image? Be honest, it's cute and I want one. Zanara spread their arms out wide as if the other Gerlin had proven their point. When I initialize contact, and this image, as well as the thousands of other pictures that exist in their diplomatic package, gets spread to the other galaxies, what do you think their reaction will also be? It took a few seconds of thinking before Zantari realized with absolute horror the issue at hand. Oh no, they'll go out to get their own. Teran trafficking is going to become a problem. We can stop most of it, but not all. And even if the people doing this outside government control won't have a creation engine, these Terrans have nothing able to stop even a basic transport carrier. I don't know how these primates would react to that kind of invasion and kidnapping. Zantari started to think. Solutions had to be available. There was no such thing as impossible to the Gerlin. Can't we move just some of their planets to other galaxies, spread the Terrans around a bit to make the people in the other galaxies happy? They have over 30 systems. Surely they can spare a few planets. We can give them some Dyson spheres in return. Species at that technological level love Dyson spheres. That's the issue. I don't know. I don't know if the Terrans would see that as an insult or not. Every piece of information available about them is contradictory and stupid. I thought I could just see how they acted in the galaxy and infer from there, but, well, just look at the Teran Alliance list. They have the aggressive Littorian horde and the Scythans with their new pacificism thing. Zantari brought up the list of over 400 species once again, looking through it more carefully this time. Zanara was right. Every single member on this list was a contradiction to the other. By any reasonable accounts, this organization should have fallen to infighting about 5 years after it was made. Wait, is that the Jakugar and Ur? Aren't they in the middle of a 400-year war of genocide against each other? They were now for the last 40 years. That's been put on hold ever since they joined the Alliance. It makes no sense. I can't tell if the Terrans are pacifists or warriors, if they prefer power or information. I have no clue how to diplomatically deal with them and the issues they're about to face from our species, and I don't want to be known as the person who caused the adorably cute primates to hate us. I know they're not a threat, but I don't want something that helpless to declare war on us. I mean, seeing them try to fight us would be kinda adorable. We could even set up some fake victories for them. Zanara stared at Zantari for a moment, the latter realizing that whether the Terrans going to war was cute or not was not the point of contention. My point is, without talking to these Terrans first, I don't know how to deal with them and the problems they're about to face. I can't talk to them to find out without logging it in the official records, and doing that setting these problems in motion. I've mostly just been hoping the problem goes away on its own. Well, that wouldn't work. Just waiting for it to solve itself, that kind of problem never did. It was a classic catch-22. You didn't know how to solve the problem until you triggered the problem itself. And then it was too late. Zantari stared at the list of names once more, when an idea occurred to them. Why don't we just ask them? Did you not listen? I just explained why we can't talk with the Terrans. Not the Terrans. Them. Zantari pointed at the list of names. The ones they allied with. Each of them must know enough about the cute primates to throw their lot in with them. Why don't we just ask them? Zanara looked taken aback for a moment before waving their limbs in agreement and excitement. That could work. Those species are already in our central repositories, so no one will notice a few diplomatic meetings going on, and this area of the universe is due for a quick checkup regardless. Why didn't I think of that? It wasn't considered polite for Zantari to respond to that question, so they didn't, instead waiting patiently as the other Gerlin got to work, pulling up lists of contacts and possible meeting dates, going through the logistics of contacting as many diplomats as possible. Do you want to be the one to go, Zantari? It was your idea, and I have a busy schedule for the next year. Could be fun, talking with people. I haven't traveled outside Gerlin space for a good few years. Should be something new. Something new indeed. Once again, Zantari stared at the list of names, hundreds of species, each one as varied as the last. Warrior races, traders, single-planet species who only just got FTL and multi-system empires. There was no sense to it all, no rhyme, no reason. But there must be. There must be a reason why all these different cultures agreed to ally themselves with these adorable primates, a central rule that explains what these Terrans stand for. All Zantari had to do was travel around the galaxy and ask these species to explain why they joined the Teran Alliance, to ask them to explain, when these Terrans asked them to join, why we said yes.